That's right.
Brandon Aiyuk, folks, he needs us. He needs you.
That's
He
right.
needs me.
That's right.
He needs the fans. He needs us. At his time of need, are we going to be there for him?
We were there. We had nothing else to do all week, Larry. We were there.
Why does he need us? Because he himself doesn't have the leverage.
Right.
The leverage comes from the rank and file Niner fan going, what the hell are the Niners doing? They're screwing up. And if he talks about it publicly, then it's in the public discourse, and there's more people going, why is Aiyuk not signed?
Yeah. And now there's a bunch of other fan bases saying, oh, let's trade for him. And it gets the wheel spinning again, right? But the 49ers also, I do feel like this is often forgotten. And I know you and I aren't forgetting it. I imagine that the vast majority of people watching this aren't forgetting it. But if we're just talking about casuals, if we're just talking about people being like, what's going on with Aiyuk, who don't think about this all the time, he is under contract. He's going to get paid $14 million to play professional football this year for the San Francisco 49ers. They don't have to do anything. And so when we talk about leverage, Brandon Aiyuk needs to think to himself, do I want to ride this out? Do I want to bet on myself? Do I want to? The 49ers, I think, would be very comfortable letting him go to free agency or slapping a franchise tag on him, whatever. But I think they're comfortable with letting him play on the 5th-year option. It's cheaper. There's a lot of things that could go wrong for him. There's a lot of stuff that could go right for him, in which case he's pretty much getting the same money either way to what he's asking for currently. So they don't have to do squat. And if I'm Brandon Aiyuk, I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to go on the field again without my future secured, because it's the NFL. You get one of these contracts, and this is if you're the cream of the crop. You're not a quarterback. I mean, even wide receivers, you get one of them. Look at like Stephon Diggs. You get one big-time 5-6-year contract. You better make as much hay as you can on it. And, man, going out onto the field, he can't really hold out all year or hold in or anything like that.
He's got to show up. Otherwise, it doesn't advance the year, right? I mean, what is it, week 6, week 8, somewhere in there?
That's
somewhere
right.
in there, he's got to show up. He can't just hold out the whole year and advance his narrative.
That's right. And then beyond that, I mean, the fines have already started. And if he gets to the end of the training camp preseason schedule, he's out millions of dollars. I mean, he's out a significant portion of the salary that's due to him. And I mean, that's not something to scoff at, because again, you're not guaranteed another contract after that. Now, you probably will get it and you probably deserve it. But if he goes out there and has all 3 of his ligaments and a ligament we don't know about tear in his knee, heaven forbid, in week 8 of the regular season, Brandon Aiyuk might never make big money playing in the NFL again. He might never play in the NFL again. So that's the threat that is looming over every NFL player. And if you're Brandon Aiyuk, again, you have one chance to make as much hay as you can. And so the question he has to ask himself is, the principle of I deserve to be paid $31, $32, $33 million. Is it worth standing on that principle so much so that I jeopardize the chance of getting 27, 28, 29 million? Is $3 million a strong enough principle for me to stand on? And it's easy for me to say no, or it's easy for you to say yes. That's Brandon Aiyuk's decision. And I think when push comes to shove and the 49ers come to the table and they get into a little bit of a back and forth and some compromises are made, that they'll come to an agreement that, hey, this works out for everybody. 49ers get cost certainty. Brandon Aiyuk gets the insurance of a 5-year or 6-year contract with a lot of fully guaranteed money, and everybody's happy. But right now, everything is so loose. It's very difficult to get a read on who's in the lead or who has the advantage. All you can sort of see are two parties almost acting separately around this abstract concept that is the contract negotiations. They'll need to get to a table. I imagine they'll be at a table near the start of training camp, and that's when we start to really get into the nitty-gritty. It might end up in the same place we're at now. They could hash this thing out in 45 minutes too. I don't know, but right now I do feel like it's very premature to make any gross generalizations about, oh, well, he's leaving or, oh, he's staying, because they're not really at a table. They're not really even doing this thing earnestly.
What's the deadline? Soft, hard, whatever.
Yeah,
What's the deadline? I've heard people say the reporting date for training camp is the deadline. I've heard other people say, no, it's the first preseason game. I've heard other people say, no, it's literally like Bosa last year. That was the deadline, September 5th 6 days
Right.
before the opener. What is the actual deadline? And how hardball do you think this thing gets? And like if you're the 49ers, if Aiyuk does want to play super hardball
Mhm.
and not show up for camp, not show up for the preseason, not show up for week 1 and try to pull this, I'll just show up the minimum
Yeah.
time, and do they play then super hardball with him, yank his sheets, and send him packing somewhere else and say, you know what? We don't want to be attached to a receiver who's going to play these games in the regular season with us.
Mm.
We'll move him along and let somebody else have that problem.
I am not of the mind currently, though I can certainly foresee a circumstance, but it just feels small to me that the 49ers move Brandon Aiyuk this year. Um, on the principle of they are still trying to win the Super Bowl. Now, if you ask me in mid-August, I might have a different opinion. But as of mid-June, or I guess the midsummer, shout out to our Scandinavian viewers. Um, it is it just seems so that seems so toxic in this situation. While I think externally you might say this doesn't look, I don't think it's toxic. I mean, Debo Samuel was doing a lot crazier shit than this during his standoff with the 49ers, and they just got it done. And that was actually a pretty cut and dry, easy to go contract negotiation once they finally got to the table. But there was a lot of posturing nonsense that went into it. So if I had to give it a deadline, I would say first preseason game is when the real, I mean, first preseason game is a regular season game check for Brandon Aiyuk. It's a weird part of the CBA, whereas if you are holding out and you miss a preseason game, you are not in uniform, you're scratched or whatever, you're not available to the team. They dock you a regular season game check. So that's $800,000 roughly for Brandon Aiyuk. That is when we go, okay, one of these two parties is really playing hardball, perhaps even both. But that's when we know that this isn't messing around. This isn't just posturing. This isn't, social media nonsense or standing on a loose principle. That's when we know, hey, this thing might not actually get done anytime soon. And in that situation, then we got to take a lay of the land and say, okay, if it's not getting done anytime soon, do the Niners have an offer to move them? I keep coming back to, if the Niners wanted to move him, he would have been moved before the draft. And the idea of trading him just before the season does so little. I mean, it's such a kneecapping move to not have Brandon Aiyuk because you can't get anything back for him that will help you in the 2024 season. You're only going to get 2025 draft picks if you're lucky. And I
Well,
don't know if
you never know. I mean, there's always a chance you could get another player coming back